Thank you, Siobhan from MitoQ, for joining us this evening. It's just really awesome to have you along. And as I was saying just before, really excited about just hopefully learning a little bit more about MitoQ and mitochondrial health, because it's quite complex. So it's going to be great to have some your help in understanding it. So thank you. To start with, I wondered if maybe we could go through and just quickly introduce yourselves and maybe tell us something that you're hoping to learn from this evening. And and then we can sort of get going.
I-
Siobhan.
I'll go first. Yeah. So
Okay, sweet.
I'm Siobhan Mitchell. I am the CSO of MitoQ, and I have just recently moved to Auckland with my family from New York. So we're really getting used to New Zealand life, which is great so far. We're in Maraetai. I don't know if you know where that is. Oh, and I will say, Nick, I really enjoyed reading your book. I read your book
Oh,
6 months ago, so it
oh,
was great.
true. Oh, awesome. Thank you. Nice. And welcome to New Zealand, by the way.
Thank you.
Yes.
I can go next. I'm Kirsten. Few faces and names that I don't recognise. So welcome on board, guys, because you are the new recipients. I'm a alumni from last year. Walked the old Ghost Road, so it was awesome. What am I hoping to learn tonight? Probably just to get to front of mind again why it's good to be taking supplements such as MitoQ. And it was an interesting thing because we were gifted some, or I was gifted some in the lead up to my expedition last year. And it's really hard to know when you're making lots of changes all at once what it is that's being beneficial. That is probably everything. So I could just do with a reminder about, encompassing sort of holistic health, I guess, and looking at it from every angle, and maybe getting myself taking something again for some cellular support. So it's me.
Awesome. Thank you, Kirsten. Raffaella, you're next on my little band of faces there. Ah, still can't hear you. Yeah, sorry about that. Well, maybe just while we're waiting, Michelle, would you like to introduce yourself? And also, because you haven't met Kirsten, do you want to tell us what you are hoping to do as well?
Oh, cool. Yeah, so I'm Michelle. Um, what am I going to do? I'm going to hopefully climb a peak somewhere. I haven't decided which one. But yeah, it's such a blessing to have this grant. Yeah, and so awesome, Kirsten, that you did the old ghost. It's so amazing that track. So that's really cool. What I want to learn today, I think just to get some good information on cell health and things like that. Yeah, that's me.
Oh, Raffaella, should we try round two? Maybe not yet. Um,
Okay.
Jody, are you there? Oh, Raffaella, it sounds like
Can
maybe
you
there
hear
might be
me?
sound coming from you.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm so sorry, guys. My fancy bloody Bose Bluetooth speaker are not really playing ball tonight. Every time changes. Okay. Hi, I'm Rafaela. um, um, I resonate a lot with what Kirsten said in terms of learning. Um, I did take MitoQ for a while. I restarted recently, doing lots of changes altogether. I'm taking different magnesium supplements at the moment, really trying to um, understand better my sleeping patterns because that's a key thing for me, and as well really watching my fatigue because I'm trying to be more active. I'm doing a million things, and so understand how to support that better. And yeah, I think I'm really ignorant when it comes to mitochondria, so it would be nice to see how to support that. I have FND and I have Parkinson, so just be like, okay, what to do to support that and improve. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. And hopefully, I'm not sure if Jody and Steph are kind of around, but
I'm around. I'm just driving, so I'm just
oh,
being as present as possible.
thank you.
I'm super keen to understand the science a bit more. I have noticed a huge difference, even the difference I started on one and then boosted to two, and noticed the difference in taking two a day. My questions are, I guess, around if there's any research around how it affects sleep, and my timing of it, and whether I need to take it earlier, because similar to Rafaela, sleep is a thing that I really have to focus on improving. And then I guess some of the practical questions too, like, so it says 20 minutes before food. Could that be 60 minutes, or does it need to be 20 minutes? Do I need to be a little bit more organized in regards to my timing and that sort of stuff? So that's me.
Oh, thank you, Jody. And it sounds like maybe Steph might just be listening today, so we will we will just leave it there. So yeah, so thank you again, Siobhan. And do you want to just introduce yourself and your job, and then introduce us to MitoQ and mitochondria?
Okay, I'm delighted to. So I'll give you a really brief background because I'm really just excited about answering all your questions. I love questions, and in fact, during this whole presentation, please interrupt and ask questions if like something's not clear or you like want to get like more understanding on something, because like that's I think where learning's most interesting is when you get the chance to delve where you find, the real excitement. And I am the same way. So let's go find the excitement together. So anyway, so I have a PhD in neuroscience, and all my life I have been really interested in the brain, but also how nutrition affects the brain. So that is what I would say is my specialty. I've worked all over the world, in Switzerland, the Netherlands, obviously the US, trying to understand how you can prevent brain aging through nutrition, how you can improve mood, how you can improve child development. So just anything you can think of that you can apply nutrition and, understanding the brain better, that's my sweet spot. So I've really loved starting to work for MitoQ. It's been about 2 years. I find it just a really innovative, cool, but caring company. So that's the wonderful thing I think about how MitoQ has developed over the years. So it's great to hear that's helped you. So yeah, I'm now just trying to spread the word about MitoQ because, as I was telling Nick earlier, like the mitochondria are hard to explain, and people are like, okay, MitoQ, like it's a CoQ10, like what is it doing? And does it really make a difference? And I will hopefully try to explain how it is making a difference, the big unknowns, because there are a lot of unknowns. That's how science is. But yeah, I would really welcome any feedback you have on your experience as well too, because that's so important for everyone else to learn as well too about, how MitoQ can affect us all individually. So I'm trying to show my screen. I think you can see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I will have a disclaimer because I am very aware New Zealand's got a very tight regulatory situation. So I am not going to say anything that you guys can't understand, that is like sort of what I would say therapeutic stuff. But I will say things about diseased populations and how MitoQ affects diseased populations. So this is just for your education. I'm not trying to say it's therapeutic. I'm just trying to say this is what the science is. So yeah. And so I'll just give a little bit of introduction about mitochondria, and then MitoQ, how it's working in mitochondria, mitochondrial disease, and then some clinical data on MitoQ. And also a recent study that just got published on multiple sclerosis, which you might find interesting. There's actually a lot of studies going on right now on all sorts of neurological disease, which I'll explain in a little bit. But I'll start off by just kind of saying some mitochondria facts. So I think you're all aware that the mitochondria are the powerhouse of our cells. And so they make really basically all our energy. So 95% of the energy used by our body. But unfortunately, when you make energy in your mitochondria, they're also making these things called free radicals, which are these damaging molecules that occur when you take that oxygen that is allowing you to make, the energy, the ATP, and you grab it from, an oxygen molecule and stick it onto a water molecule, which is kind of what you're making energy from. You're taking oxygen and turning it into water. That oxygen can sometimes just get reactive and attack other things, including your proteins, your DNA, your, lipid membranes, so the sort of membranes around your cells. Super bad for you, right? So if you damage your DNA, for instance, you can imagine that DNA is not going to be able to now replicate a new cell for you, and you're not going to have as much growth and regeneration. If you damage a protein, that protein won't work anymore, and your cells can dysfunction. So if it's a skin cell, it's no longer going to make the nice kind of structure and texture your skin should have. So you can kind of imagine how this all works. And so the mitochondria, because they're making so much of these free radicals, are actually exposed to 10 times more free radicals than the rest of the cell. So it needs even more protection. But guess what? It's really actually hard to protect mitochondria because they're what's called a privileged area of the cell. So they have their own kind of membrane around them, and it's really hard to get anything into that membrane because it's such a sort of delicate balance in the way it works. It's kind of protecting itself. So when people try to take, lots of supplements or vitamins and things like that, a lot of it is not going to get into the mitochondria. So you're not going to get all the benefits of, antioxidants that can help you with these free radicals. I think you guys all have heard of antioxidants before. There's only very, very few antioxidants that can really get into the mitochondria. MitoQ is one of them, but I just want you to be aware of it. So because the mitochondria keep making all this free radicals as they're making energy, at some point damage starts to occur to them and your actual energy production drops up to 10% per decade. So this is just how aging works. I think you guys have all seen this in action. As people are getting older, they just have less energy. That's because your mitochondria aren't working well. If you get your mitochondria as protected as possible, then you're literally staving off an aging mechanism. So that's, I think the main message I want you to just take home today is that if you can protect your mitochondria, you can actually decrease your rate of aging and keep your energy levels up, to as optimal as you can. It's not perfect, but it's definitely something that is possible with, as you guys have discussed, the right kind of multimodal healthy lifestyle, but also some supplements can help as well too. And I want to just point out too that, you will probably notice when you start to lose energy that you're noticing it in places like your brain, your heart, and your muscle, because these are the areas that use the most energy. So they wear out first, right? So I think we can all sort of attest to that a lot of the time our brain seems to wear out before other things are when you're having a lot of stress. Same thing with your muscles. And I don't know if you're all aware, your heart actually is the thing that usually wears out first when people die of heart disease than anything else. Okay, so I just want to give you a quick analogy because I think this always helps explain a little bit more about this free radical thing. So, imagine your cells are like coal plants. They're making energy, but they're also making pollution, which is that oxidative stress. So they're just making all this stuff, like bad damaging things that gets let out into the environment and then goes and attacks everything else nearby, the way that air pollution can kind of attack all of us when we're exposed to it. And what I think is interesting is that it's such a slow process, right? You just don't notice what's going on until it's too late, right? Because, when people actually start to really notice the damage, it's, as I said, probably decades later, you haven't really seen sort of the damage occur in your body, but it's happening. And next thing you know, you're diagnosed with things like diabetes, fatty liver, heart disease. The one thing that I can tell you is the best way to keep your mitochondria healthy and prevent aging is something called calorie restriction. Has anyone heard about this before? So if you are having kind of limited calories every day, and they've shown this in mice and pretty much every organism you can think of up to monkeys, they're still working on showing this conclusively in humans, but the idea is if you eat maybe 6% of the calories that you normally would, you decrease your rate of aging and you get to live longer. So that is what has like been shown for like decades and decades of research. Like, yes, 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 this always works. No one can probably want to like think about a life where they're restricted all the time. It's too depressing. So there's been a lot of work trying to find what they call calorie restriction mimetics, so they can mimic calorie restriction. And the reason why this is so helpful for your lifespan is that if you can trick your cells into thinking there's very little, supply of energy in terms of like nutrients, like calories coming in, then your energies, like your cells become more efficient in how they're using energy, right? They become more efficient. They're only making the proteins you really need. They're only making, extra cells that you really need. Because if you're making a ton of extra stuff, then you're actually producing things that, then have to get some point cleared away. And then that can cause wear and tear because you're just accumulating too much stuff. It's kind of like you can imagine, when you're in your house and you've accumulated so much stuff and it's just gunking up your house. This can also happen in your cells as well, too. If you have too much energy, you can just gunk up your cells with too much stuff. And so what's interesting about this calorie restriction thing is that now that they found a few things that work on that, things like resveratrol, I don't know if anyone's ever heard about resveratrol, they found that they all seem to work on the same pathways, which are involving mitochondria and also involving these, I would say, oxidative stress pathways. So if you can decrease oxidative stress, and right here, I'm calling it reactive oxygen species. That's just another term for it. It's basically this idea of, these oxygenated molecules damaging you. You can prolong aging, or not prolong aging, prolong life through decreased aging. So MitoQ is actually working on those pathways. So that's what's kind of cool, is that it really is, I would say, an energy maximizer, but also an optimizer. One other thing I just want to point out is that mitochondria are the thing that are making more oxidative stress than anywhere else in your body, but there's a lot of oxidative stress coming from everywhere. And it's just a good thing to be aware of what can happen when you have these exposures to what I call endogenous oxidative stress. So, mitochondrial disorders, metabolism, which I mean, kind of being overweight or having like, really high blood glucose, like diabetes, or like too much inflammation or immune system going haywire, like these all cause oxidative stress inside you, so endogenous factors. And then there's exogenous, which are things on the outside of your body that are also causing oxidative stress, like radiation, xenobiotics, or just literally like, bacteria and things like that, smoking, alcohol abuse. So just, minimizing, obviously, oxidative stress from your mitochondria is good, but then, think of these other factors as well, too. I'm just going to quickly try to talk about an antioxidant so you guys can understand like why something like MitoQ is helpful at getting rid of oxidative stress. And basically the main thing to remember is that a reactive oxygen species is something that has an unpaired electron. It's got this electron that is really reactive. Kind of think of it as like, like an electrical device that is just kind of like flowing with too much energy, and it's just trying to do things, like to find a way to balance out its energy. That's what's going on here, is that unpaired electron is trying to find another electron to balance out its energy. And so what an antioxidant does is it basically can donate an electron to this unbalanced free radical and then kind of calm it down so it doesn't want to damage anything anymore. So that's how antioxidants work. So that's how MitoQ works. It's basically got an extra electron that it can just sort of donate to things and then, calm down that oxidative stress. So that is the secret. That's what MitoQ does. Why is MitoQ so different than all the other antioxidants I'm sure you've heard of? We all kind of have heard about like, oh, drink this berry juice. It's got lots of antioxidants. MitoQ is special because it's been engineered to be an antioxidant that gets into that mitochondria. Remember how I told you it's really hard to get things in the mitochondria? MitoQ was invented, I think you probably have heard this, in New Zealand as a way to make a CoQ10 that can get into the mitochondria easily. And CoQ10 is what is called a natural antioxidant that your mitochondria make to protect itself. But as you get older, you make less and less CoQ10. And nobody knows quite why, but it's just simply something that it's been shown again and again. So, this scientist, Mike Murphy, and this other scientist, Rob Smith, were trying to figure out what can we do about the fact that CoQ10 can't get into the mitochondria. Let's make this special molecule which has a special tag on it that allows it to get sucked into the mitochondria and act as an antioxidant and protect your mitochondria better. So that's how they made MitoQ. And this is kind of how it looks, right? So here's MitoQ and here's CoQ10. And the main part that's acting as an antioxidant are these like little red dots right here. They're the part that can give the electron, donated to something else, like a free radical. And then this part down here is this triphenylphosphonium ion. You don't have to remember that. It's not an important thing. But the idea is it's very positively charged, and the mitochondria is very negatively charged. So it basically gets sucked into the mitochondria as this positively charged thing that the mitochondria is trying to sort of balance itself out. Nature is all about balance. It really is. There's just a lot of it going on. So yeah, that is basically the beauty of MitoQ. It's this very special thing that gets into the mitochondria better than anything else ever, really. And there's studies that have been shown this, in terms of other things, like other kinds of antioxidants getting into mitochondria, like MitoQ is really the best. So just in a nutshell, what is MitoQ doing? It's protecting your mitochondria. So this is a picture of mitochondria against a lot of damage from these free radicals, which are these little sort of like sparky things right here. It's preventing those free radicals from leaking into the wider cell that damage, as I say, like your DNA and your proteins and all the rest. It protects against membrane damage. It also upregulates your natural antioxidants. So that's also really important too, to protect your mitochondria. It protects against DNA damage. And it supports clean energy production, which is that idea of like, talking about the coal plant. If you can make energy with less air pollution, if you can make ATP, which is the energy currency of the cell, with less oxidative stress, then like you've won the game. So that's what it is. Are there any questions? I know I talk fast and sometimes I get excited and I try to like get a little bit too fancy with the analogies, but I hope it's clear. Yeah.
And just FYI, I have put people on mute, or everybody on mute. So if you do have a question at any point, just remember to unmute yourself.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, definitely interrupt me.
I honestly haven't put you on mute,
it.
Siobhan, so.
Okay.
No.
This slide is just something that I've had so many people ask me about the differences of CoQ10 and MitoQ that I just feel like it's good to have this slide to just really point out how it's different from CoQ10, because I'm sure you've all have heard of CoQ10. But the main thing is CoQ10 is a great antioxidant on its own. It just doesn't really get into many places. It's absorbed really badly into the body in general. You have to take fatty foods to have any kind of hope of getting it absorbed. But even then, when you take it, it kind of very slowly gets taken up into like organs and tissue, and it really doesn't go into the mitochondria at all, like barely any of it. So you need to take tons of it. And this is also, I think, where, when people try to take MitoQ, like they're always probably, fighting against the fact that most of it's just getting like flushed out of your body right away. So it's sort of like a little waste of money. Sorry?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Okay, first thing, that you're amazing. Like the clarity of what you explained so far, I'm just like, oh my God, I'm understanding this so well for the first time ever, like listening to this. So thank you about that. I wanted to ask you, so the effect of taking it, does it last only while you take it, or does it continue? How long does it last in the body, that protection effect?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it actually is something that is pretty good at staying in the body for quite a while. So when they've done studies looking at MitoQ, they see that, it gets into the body pretty quickly. Within an hour, you kind of have peak amounts in the blood. And then it starts going into your cells, so going from your blood into like your heart tissue and your brain tissue and all that. And once it gets into cells and your cell mitochondria, it's actually really happy to stay in your mitochondria and, kind of get recycled by the mitochondria to keep on being an antioxidant, because a lot of antioxidants don't stay active as antioxidants. They kind of get worn out, but MitoQ keeps acting still as an antioxidant. Eventually it does kind of fall apart and get sort of taken out of the mitochondria and taken out of the cell, and it sort of disappears. But the studies, at least in animals, have shown that if you keep taking MitoQ, you're going to have, a fairly good amount reaching your muscles, for instance, and staying in your muscles for like weeks at a time. So, for instance, if you're worried about like missing a dose, like, oh, I forgot a dose today, am I going to like start to experience like a terrible energy like loss? No, you're probably fine for like up to a week or so before your, actual MitoQ levels in your muscle or your heart or your kidneys or your liver or whatever start to really go down. So that's good to remember. It's not something that you have to keep on freaking out about, oh, every 24 hours I have to take it or it just all goes away. It doesn't go away that quickly. CoQ10 does. So yeah, it's a bit different.
And do you have to build up like an amount? Like there is a threshold that after you take
Yeah. So I would say you do have to. Because, obviously getting like 1 or 2 molecules of MitoQ into your mitochondria are all well and good, but you definitely want to get a whole bunch in there so your mitochondria are fully protected, right? And it's difficult to say how much is needed for each person because everyone's so individual. They have health conditions that might make it so that their mitochondria need more protecting, for instance. So I would say, in general, people start to notice the difference of MitoQ after a month or so. And that's, I think, the sort of general understanding of like, you might start feeling like your energy is a little bit better, that, you don't have as much inflammation. A lot of the clinical studies I'm going to talk about today are showing effects at 6 weeks. So definitely you can imagine 6 weeks is when we can show a lot of good clinical effects from MitoQ. If you're really sick, I would say you might start noticing it even sooner, right? Because like you are, having a lot more issues with your mitochondria and dysfunction, so they might be getting a lot more benefit from even a little bit of protection from MitoQ.
Thank
Is that
you.
clear?
Yeah, perfectly. Thank you,
Cool.
Siobhan.
And just one quick thing on the timing. I have found I've been taking MitoQ for 10 years now, which has been, well, it'll be 10 years in a couple of months, but almost 10 years. And so, but there was probably about 5 or 6 years ago, there was a spot there where I thought I had more MitoQ, and I finished my last bottle, and then I was away, and so there was about 3 weeks where I didn't have any, and towards the end of that time began to experience quite a lot of brain fog. But then once I got back onto it, it did quite quickly clear. But yeah, it seemed like it was all good for the 2 weeks-ish from when I stopped taking it, but then it started to there was a noticeable decline in brain fog and or increase in brain fog and decline in energy. It was really interesting experience actually.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting to hear. I mean, that you can really, I would appreciate like the fact that you can kind of, as you say, like do okay, and then after you say like after a few weeks, just you start noticing the symptoms of just kind of like, oh, my clarity is not as good. So it's interesting that maybe like for you, in particular, it's maybe not like muscle fatigue, it's really just your brain feeling like it's just getting fatigued more quickly.
Yes.
But it's great that it helped you right away.
Mm.
Anyone else have an example like that? I love hearing these examples. Okay, we can talk more about it. I just want to also point out this study about MitoQ versus CoQ10. This is the one study that we actually looked at, trying to understand how MitoQ is working differently than CoQ10. And mainly what we showed in this study is we gave MitoQ 20 mg a day for 6 weeks to middle-aged men, and then also gave another group of men CoQ10 in the form of Qunol. This is like a really popular brand of CoQ10. And what we saw was that for muscle mitochondria reactive oxygen species, the MitoQ dose decreased those reactive oxygen species. This is called hydrogen peroxide. This is a really particularly bad form of reactive oxygen species. But CoQ10 did not do anything really. It was not significantly changing your free radicals. So that's kind of, I would say, our proof that we saw that, CoQ10 is really not getting to the mitochondria where it needs to be, in your muscles at least, but MitoQ is. And then we also looked at a few other things in the muscle, like these antioxidant enzymes that are also really important for protecting your mitochondria. And we saw, interestingly, that MitoQ could increase catalase, which is a really, I would say, key antioxidant enzyme. And CoQ10 wasn't really doing anything at all. So that's just kind of, because people are always saying, like, prove that it's different than CoQ10. This is what I would say is our proof. So I am now going to go into clinical studies, but I will tell you we have so many clinical studies that I cannot tell you all of them. We have about 24 that have been completed, another 30 or so in the pipeline. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent on MitoQ. So, we have a lot of data that, like, literally, if you want to know if MitoQ can affect XYZ, I could probably find you some study that indicates of whether it can or not. So just let me know if you've got like any particular question on what it can do. This one I did want to go into because I think this is a really pivotal study of MitoQ for vascular function, which is, I think, something that I don't know if people are always thinking about their heart as much as they should. I mean, mostly, we live our life feeling pretty healthy and all the rest. But as I said at the very beginning, most of us will die of some sort of heart-related dysfunction. There's cancer, there's other things, but this is really the thing that will probably kill the majority of us, stroke or, other types of things that are affecting our heart. And one of the best ways you can actually even understand if you're aging or not is your arteries start to harden. This is a classic sign of aging, and very few things can stop your arteries from hardening, which is a big deal, because if you can't keep your arteries flexible, you can't keep blood flow optimal to all your organs. And this is going to affect your brain function. This is going to affect your muscles. This is going to affect how much you can regenerate, because, yeah, you need all that blood, those nutrients getting to everywhere at the right amounts. And so, this blood flow thing is super important. And what they saw with MitoQ is that after 6 weeks of MitoQ given to people who are somewhat older, 60 to 79 years, that they were able to show that vasodilation was improved by 42% with MitoQ. And it also decreased this really important type of cholesterol called oxidized LDL. And I think you've all heard of LDL cholesterol as like the bad cholesterol. But actually, why is it bad? It's bad because it's very easily oxidized. So it gets attacked by those free radicals. Once it gets attacked by those free radicals, it then starts to damage your arteries. It makes a scar on your arteries. Once you have a scar on your arteries, that scar can start to be filled with plaque. And that is how you get clogged arteries. So that's actually why people have heart attacks, is this clogging of arteries. And so this is where oxidized LDL is like a really, really bad biomarker for your overall aging and heart health. And MitoQ is also able to decrease that as well, too. And lastly, as I said, this aortic versus artery stiffening, artery hardening was also reduced by MitoQ. So this is, I think, across the board, all these different indications of how good MitoQ is for your vasculature, for your heart, for your arteries, and the way that your blood can then keep you healthy as well. Now I'm going to switch over to another pivotal study, which is on exercise, because for sure, without a doubt, I'm sure you've heard this before, exercise is the very best thing you can do for your health. And what I always hear is people saying like, oh, but I just don't feel like it. I don't feel very good. It's really hard for me. And so I always like to point out that something like MitoQ can make it so exercise can go better for you, right? So it's that little boost. And so, for instance, in this particular area, like they tried to show whether, people who are middle-aged, that maybe have not exercised a ton in their lives, if you try to see how well they can do a very, very like difficult thing, which is a time trial. I don't know if you guys have heard of time trials, what they are. It's basically when you have to like bike as fast as you can until you feel like you're going to explode, you're going to just die. It's really hard. They're like, okay, let's see if MitoQ can make it so that that's an easier thing. And what they did show is that they can make it actually an easier thing. So, they could complete this really hard time trial faster. They had better energy output. And when they completed that really, really stressful, exercise, that they had less of these isoprostates, which are a really important marker of inflammation. And inflammation is basically, when you've made your muscles really unhappy and somewhat damaged, and they're no longer going to be working as well, and you have to then wait for them to recover. Well, now this is making it so if you take MitoQ, your muscles can recover quicker because they're having less inflammation. So yeah, so I think this is another nice thing to just also recognize about something like MitoQ. It's helping your muscles work as well. And this one, I think, is a very perfect example of how you can take exercise, which, as I said, so good for your health, and MitoQ, and see that they are of synergistic effects. So this is where they took, once again, male subjects. It still works for women. I can also show you some women's studies as well, who are a little bit older and hypertensive. And they gave 6 weeks of MitoQ, 20 milligrams again, with or without moderate exercise. So like this exercise regime. And they saw that with MitoQ just alone, you could improve their blood pressure. And you could also improve these oxidative stress markers like MDA. MDA is another one that kind of causes inflammation and, sort of wear and tear in your muscles. And they saw that, exercise could do a good job too. But when you combine them together, it was like even more powerful. So there's like this nice synergy. So I think this is really important because sometimes people are sort of saying, like, what's the point of like, exercise if it's really hard for me? Is it going to be like a big benefit? Well, MitoQ can help that benefit, and it will also synergize, so you're getting more out of it. And so I will say, what I was really delighted to see actually last week was another study on exercise, but this time with people with multiple sclerosis. And what they were trying to show here is not so much whether they can actually stave off multiple sclerosis, because those kinds of studies are really, really long and like very involved. What they're trying to do here is do a pilot study. So, just that they had the hypothesis that maybe MitoQ can help with multiple sclerosis. So let's first look at some biomarkers that might indicate that it will be good and beneficial in the long run for multiple sclerosis symptoms. So that's what they're trying to do in this study. So they basically just gave MitoQ for 8 weeks. So, not enough time to make a huge difference in function, but enough difference to start to see whether, these biomarkers that are very indicative of, multiple sclerosis dysfunction can be changed. And then they're also interested to see how exercise can also, have an effect on these kind of inflammatory markers. And so they paired MitoQ with the exercise. This is just to give you an idea of what the exercise was. It's not a crazy amount of exercise. It's basically 5 minutes of warm up, 20 minutes of exercise training at around 50% of your maximum heart rate, and then a 5-minute cool down. So not really crazy. And then they looked at these inflammation markers like IL-6. And what I thought was really interesting is they looked at both premenopausal and menopausal women, because I am sure you guys have all heard that once you go through menopause, this protective estrogen goes down, it kind of drops to almost like male level. And you start getting a lot more of these, I would say, kind of diseases of aging, like I mentioned, like heart disease. You get like more diabetes. You've probably all heard, after menopause, you're just accumulating a lot more fat and you're having a lot more inflammation. And so you can see here that during menopause, you actually are just having a lot more inflammation in general. It's just happening. So the MitoQ is maybe not doing as much of an effect, but it still is having a synergy with exercise, which I think, once again, is very cool. But with premenopause, you can see that MitoQ is having a really strong effect, as is exercise. So I think what I would just venture to say here is that it's really clear that before menopause, it's really important to exercise and also, protect your mitochondria and keep all this going as well as you can, because it'll be a lot more difficult after you go through menopause. So I will say, interestingly, this is a little bit of an aside, there's now a whole field, believe it or not, of looking at ways to stave off menopause as a way to stave off biological aging, which I think is such a fascinating area. So there's a lot of data out there that shows if you have menopause at a much later age, this is also going to be predictive of you having a longer and healthier lifespan. which, is sort of cool. So keep your ovaries healthy and keep yourself healthy, and you'll probably also have those effects as well. I am probably just going to really lightly touch on this one because this is another study that just came out, I think actually literally maybe like 3 days ago, where they're trying to see if MitoQ can have an effect for diabetes. And I thought this was really cool because they're like, how do you show like the very first sort of like start of diabetes? What is the damage that's happening that brings about diabetes? And what diabetes really seems to be is like this inflammation and oxidative stress that's occurring, especially in the mitochondria, that's brought about by too much sugar and fat in your bloodstream. So they mimicked too much sugar and fat in your bloodstream by having people take what's called a bolus lipid challenge. So basically they made people take like a huge amount of fat all at once. It's like having like a huge pizza or something like that. To see what kind of stress this would cause on your body. And what they saw was just this one lipid challenge basically made you a little bit diabetic, like right away. So it made you insulin insensitive. Then they took MitoQ and wanted to explore whether this could, keep your insulin sensitive still. So you could still have, this ability to take in this glucose, and these lipids that you just took on in a more kind of appropriate fashion and decrease oxidative stress as well. And what they saw was that MitoQ actually could. So it made it so that, your insulin was like more robust. And it also made these GLUT4 transporters, which are allowing glucose to be taken up in your muscle cells, more active. So you're getting rid of that glucose. So it's not just sitting around in your blood causing oxidative stress and inflammation. It's inside your muscles where it can like then now be used as energy. So I thought this was really cool, kind of the very first start of how diabetes is caused. MitoQ might be a way to just keep that from happening. Early days, but I thought it was really encouraging. So I wanted to share that with you. Lastly, I've been showing you all these clinical studies, but this is another one that I'm just really fond of because I'm a brain scientist. I wanted to talk a lot more about the brain than I usually can because I have to really focus on the heart. That's where MitoQ is working best. But I thought this is really fascinating as an animal study because they were trying to see how air pollution causes, brain dysfunction. And I don't know if you're aware, for instance, that if you live, for instance, like less than a mile away from a major highway, you will have higher risk of getting Alzheimer's, right? So all that pollution, that oxidative stress from like air pollution can affect your brain function over time. So, obviously you can't test on humans, like let's like give them lots of air pollution and see what happens. So what they used here is a mouse study where they expose mice to these carbon particulates, which are very similar to like what you find in car pollution or wildfires, and saw that when they're giving MitoQ at the same time in drinking water for these mice, it helped the mice stay not only more cognitively healthy, it also improved their mood. Believe it or not, you can actually measure mood in mice. I've done this many times myself. Kind of interesting. But, they also saw too, obviously lung function was better. And this is all to do with keeping your mitochondria happy. So they are also measuring the mitochondria in your brain and your lungs and saw that these are all functioning much better with MitoQ. So I thought this was interesting just because, especially in the US, you're probably aware we're having wildfires all the time. And in places like China where we saw a lot of MitoQ, there's a lot of air pollution. So yeah, so it's another way to protect yourself. So I'm now wrapping up. I didn't want to like make you have to like listen to me forever, but the main thing I wanted to let you know of is some studies that are kind of interesting for you. We have one on fatigue and multiple sclerosis, which is literally just finishing up right now. So we're really excited to see how that looks. As soon as we have data on it, I am happy to share that with you. So any moment now. We have a whole bunch on other kinds of brain disease, which I think is really fascinating. We have it on schizophrenia, on something that we call frailty. Frailty is basically when you get, really kind of like have difficulty being mobile and you have difficulty walking. And this usually comes hand in hand with also cognitive dysfunction that can lead to Alzheimer's. So we're looking basically at whether MitoQ can stave off Alzheimer's and also this, kind of mobility issue. We also have a lot of neurovascular function studies. So, once again, seeing if you can kind of keep that blood flow to the brain better for better cognition. And also a recent one that's so recent, I haven't actually put it on this list, in ALS. So that's another one that we're really excited about. Taking a while to have that one get done. It'll probably be a couple of years, but yeah, so just wanted to let you know some of the studies that we're trying to look at. We even have one in COVID, believe it or not, though it doesn't seem like anyone's getting COVID these days. But we definitely hear of long COVID, and we think long COVID is actually another thing that MitoQ can help with. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this and you didn't find it too off your chart of interests. But yeah, let me know. Well, actually, I do know you were asking a few questions about even when to take MitoQ. So let me just start with there. You don't have to have this exact 20-minute window of no food, and then I take, then I can have food after taking MitoQ. You can basically, I would say, yeah, take MitoQ, have coffee or tea or any kind of liquid you want. That's all fine. It will not affect your bioavailability. Wait up to 20 minutes, but if you want to wait longer, that's fine too. You will still get the benefits. You just need that kind of 20 minutes of just no food in your stomach so you get the maximal absorption. And for sure, I recommend taking MitoQ in the morning. I have heard enough anecdotes about people taking it in the evening, and it does kind of rev them up a little bit and makes it hard to sleep. So yeah, I don't know if anyone else has noticed that.
It's super helpful, thank you. And with and I suppose and I don't obviously fully understand all of the mechanisms at play, but in terms of even if you take MitoQ in the morning, does the sort of that reduction in oxidative stress, will that help reduce, for example, the if you've got an overactive central nervous system, like bringing that down so that you can experience more rest? Is there an interplay between MitoQ and sort of your experience of stress?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that there are animal studies showing that MitoQ does decrease anxiety in animals. And it actually makes a ton of sense if you think about it, because a lot of stress will basically send your cortisol through the roof, right? Cortisol is literally causing damage to you if it's prolonged for too long in terms of inflammation. And this is where I would say a lot of what we call depression is probably just sickness behavior. So when you get sick and you feel tired and miserable and a little bit hopeless, that is because your body's fighting the infection through a lot of inflammation. The inflammation can be good when it's being used to fight off a virus or something. But if you're having a lot of inflammation for no reason because of cortisol and stress and other things like that, then you're just literally feeling sick all the time. And so you're just going to have that kind of depression and anxiety and feeling just, yeah, generally terrible. So yeah, that does make a ton of sense to think that MitoQ can have that effect. There is a study that looked at people with chronic fatigue syndrome. I think you've probably heard of that. And they did show that MitoQ could improve sleep for them. So that's one population. We haven't looked at a whole bunch of others, but that's interesting to think about.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah.
I need to ask a selfish question. Do you have any studies about Parkinson and MitoQ?
It's funny that you asked that. When MitoQ was first invented, it was tried out in a number of animal studies with a Parkinson's kind of modeling, and it was shown to be very effective because there's a lot of understanding that Parkinson's might begin with mitochondrial dysfunction. I don't know if you're aware that dopamine, for instance, which is the molecule that goes down when you develop Parkinson's, is actually a very oxidative stress inducing molecule. So its metabolism of dopamine is actually causing a lot of oxidative stress. So neurons with dopamine synthesis are going to die sooner. So anyway, they showed amazing effects with MitoQ in these animal models, and they're like, you know what, we're going to do a human study of this. So they developed MitoQ first as a drug, and they did a Parkinson's study. But I will tell you what they didn't realize back in that day, this was like 20 years ago, is that if you try to rescue Parkinson's after all those dopamine neurons have died off or degenerated a lot, you can't bring them back. Nothing will bring them back. MitoQ will not bring back dead neurons. So when they saw the results of the study, it was like there's a few things that were being improved, some quality of life and symptoms, but the overall sort of Parkinson's outcomes they're hoping for were not improved because all the people in this study were too far down the line. They're kind of severe Parkinson's patients. So that's all I can tell you now. Once again, we have a lot of anecdotes, consumers, customers of MitoQ that kind of tell us other stories about, how it's affecting especially their motor dysfunction for a number of diseases involving that. So like Huntington's, ALS, Parkinson's. So yeah, I think it might, but I can't promise you anything.
No, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
And so with Parkinson's, then like intervening early with MitoQ, do you think that that might have had a better outcome?
Yeah, that's really what I'm trying to say is that, you need to start taking something like MitoQ even before you think anything is really wrong. So for instance, I think the best result would be, if you have some sort of predisposition to Parkinson's, some risk factors or whatever, to start taking MitoQ at that early stage, so the sooner the better, that if you can figure that out. So, I mean, in a way, it all benefits us to maybe take something like MitoQ because we're all going to have probably some sort of degenerative disease at some point. No one's got the perfect genes, so it just makes sense.
Totally.
I just thought it was gonna be another 20 years at least. Just God arrived a little bit earlier than what I forecasted for something bad to happen.
You never know. I mean, it's just a crazy world. It's a crazy life. So yeah, I am very curious to hear if you feel like it does have any benefit. I don't know if you've noticed anything like at the start of taking it, and yeah.
I suddenly have more energy. I'm exercising way more. I usually exercise 4 to 5 days a week. But as Kirsten was saying, when you change lots of things together, like pretty much I'm almost off alcohol. Like I might have one Sunday drink a week, if I'm drinking, or two, when I used to have maybe two a day. And I work in the wine industry, just I'll say that as a side note. So yeah, I don't know what is it, but I think I'm certainly motivated. I need to get more, and I'm certainly motivated to be way more regular now that I really understand how important it is potentially for the body.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's great that you're doing so many things at once. That's key, right? It's not just like, oh, let's find a silver bullet. It's like, no, just take everything that you can that makes sense that could help. And yeah, try to just notice what you can. I'm a big fan of wearables. I love, looking at heart rate variability and, overall kind of like, what was my heart rate when I was exercising? Was it doing a little bit better? Even the way that your sleep patterns are, I think are very indicative of your overall stress and your overall health. So I love that stuff, your deep sleep and your REM. So if you can invest in one of those watches, yeah.
Yeah, I need to. I don't have one. I really have to because I used to have a tracker, but it wasn't really accurate. So
yeah, it's a good investment. It's just it's something to just even give you a little bit of incentive as well too, that you can kind of feel like you are making those small differences.
Mm-hmm. See, you're gonna make me spend so much money, Siobhan, after today.
Well, if there's anything to spend money on, it's your health. So yeah.
Siobhan, I was just going to ask, speaking of spending money, I think I will sign myself up to get some MitoQ. So I have multiple sclerosis. I see there's a range. I've only ever taken the MitoQ Pure before, but you've got a range of different ones with sort of added on benefits. What would you recommend for those of us with neurological challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I would say those ranges, as you probably have noticed, like try to look at other systems that, for instance, can be, helped by MitoQ, but might be even boosted more by something added on, So for instance, we have like a MitoQ plus curcumin product because we actually have studies, like they're animal studies, but they're very convincing studies showing that if you combine curcumin and MitoQ, you decrease a lot of amyloid Alzheimer's pathology, in mice, but kind of very indicative that the two are better than the one. So that's sort of how we invent these ranges as we look for those synergies. For something like multiple sclerosis, I would probably imagine the MitoQ plus curcumin would be a very good combination because, curcumin is an amazing anti-inflammatory agent. I've done a lot of research on it. It makes like new neurons in your brain. It helps with myelin growth and all the rest. So I think that would be a good thing to start off with. But like for sure, I think MitoQ Pure will also do the job. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Siobhan.
Sure.
I think I take the MitoQ plus curcumin as well.
Oh, okay. There you go. I think people really notice that synergy benefit. So I think it just makes sense for especially people with brain sort of issues.
Mm. But do we have any additional questions?
Sometimes I know I just throw so much data at people, but I'm happy to share this presentation and you can look over it. And if you have other questions, happy to also answer all the questions offline. So if you want to go away and think about it and then ask me later, that's fine too.
Sweet. Oh, thank you. Yes.
I just had a quick question.
Oh, you go for it, Jodie.
Yeah.
My GP suggested PQQ. And I just wanted, like, obviously you're talking about CoQ10 versus MitoQ, but what's the difference between PQQ and MitoQ?
So PQQ is another antioxidant that does enter the mitochondria to some degree, not as well as MitoQ, I would argue, though I don't know if we've ever done a side-by-side experiment. So that's probably why they're suggesting it, that they're like, you know what, PQQ will address all that oxidative stress in the mitochondria that it could be causing, deficiencies in energy and stuff like that. So I would say for sure you can try PQQ and it might have some effect for sure. It's got some good clinical data for things like, cognitive decline, but yeah, you can also combine it with MitoQ as well too. And I believe have a synergistic effect. Once again, I don't think we have any data on that, but it does make sense mechanistically.
Oh, awesome.
So funny. I don't know if you guys are having this problem because it's Guy Fawkes and I'm like hearing so many fireworks. Can you hear the fireworks from my end? No.
No.
I'm like, it's a war out there. Oh, it's crazy.
I think it must be quite silent in Christchurch. I haven't heard any here actually.
I bet they're gearing up.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Well,
that moment that you try to go to bed.
Yeah, exactly. No. Oh, look, Siobhan, I just so appreciate your time this evening. And just thank you for sharing with us your expertise and your knowledge. And yeah, as I say, I've been taking MitoQ for 10 years and have just always been blown away by MitoQ's generosity and generosity of the product, but also just of people's time and explaining stuff like this and engaging in conversation. So just really appreciate this. Thank you. And particularly in the evening after work, it's a real treat. So thank you so much.
Sure, it was really nice. It was actually really nice to hear from you and anytime. So just let me know.
Thank you. Oh, and if there are any other questions, anybody, do feel free to flick them to me and then I can pass them on.
Cool. Wish you all a very nice evening. Hopefully you get some good sleep with all this stuff going on. So
And you too.
Thank you too much.
Bye.
Thank you.